sort of when go in peace, but that's what they say for morning prayer. Is when you finish, you say, go in peace. And maybe the other one is, Lord, open my lips. Usually, maybe here because you meet once in a while, but traditionally with the monarchical settings, like after night prayers, it was total silence. That's why traditionally, I've never received my phone after night prayer. That's the end of me, and I've never missed an important phone call like your mom has collapsed or things like that, but maybe some people have shared. But then you keep that silence. So in the morning when you meet for anything else, then you say, Lord, open my lips. But I mean after Mass, after benediction, I think you just go to, the Lord has already opened your lips. But anyway, I'm not saying you change it, but for us, the other side, if we begin with Mass, then when we go for morning prayer, we omit that. Thank you.
Thank you, Father. That was helpful.
Oh, thank you.
Now, Father is going to give us a little talk, and the talk is on the images of, I have it written here. What is it, Father?
Images in the poems of John of the Cross. Okay, it's nice to begin this talk by calling upon our Father John of the Cross to intercede for us, that his teaching may help us to grow on this journey. Now, I'll begin with a story that I heard from my novice master a couple of years ago. He began by telling us, let's develop images. When someone talks about St. Francis, what comes to your mind? A gentle friar, maybe talking to birds and animals. When someone talks about Therese of Lisieux, what comes to your mind? A sister holding roses. When someone tells about Teresa of Avila, beginning one monastery to another, talking about prayer, and chatting with the nuns at the recreation. And recently, one of the parishioners, Santa Cruz, took me out for a movie night, and we watched Joselito, the little Joseph from Mexico. And what came to my mind after seeing this little kid, maybe running around with a flag and shouting to those who are anti-Christ, Viva Cristo Rey! But what about John of the Cross? What comes to your mind? And I remember we would say, he would ask us, when someone talks about John of the Cross, does it come to your mind to see a friar dancing on Christmas Day with the infant Jesus? And we all said no. Composing songs and cooking for the sick friars? Oh, so now he would tell them to fast. A careful administrator talking with landlords on how to buy land? We all denied it. An artist drawing sketches of Christ? Someone who puts up poems for his spiritual daughters and sons? Yes. And then, what would you say about John of the Cross? A mystic, gazing in space at a distance? Maybe his hands carrying a cross and a whip for his penance? Promoting fasting? Maybe his eyes were dry and bleeding. But that's not all true. In fact, the pictures might have come up to show John of the Cross lifting the cross, but maybe we don't see that in his poems. Maybe, yes, he was a mystic like anyone else, but John of the Cross was a person good at songs, and he composed a lot of songs. Unfortunately, he had a terrible background that Even, by the way, if you look at the corrected works, Teresa of Avila, look at how many letters she has, because all her letters were kept. But because of Doria's administration, even those who had the letters of John of the Cross set them on fire. So that's why you'll figure out that there are only 20 letters of John of the Cross. Very few people, but John of the Cross wrote letters in the thousands. But he went through a rough time, so we don't have that. Maybe John of the Cross, he is known for having taken care of sick friars. That was part of his ministry. He was a good cook. But maybe that's not what we would like to know about John of the Cross. So, in the mind of his master wanted to tell me that he was a lover of nature, and he was a simple friar, and he was gentle, and all these other qualities that you can bring out, that sometimes we do miss about this, our Father. The thing would be, why we miss out about John of the Cross. If you look at Teresa of Avila, Teresa of Avila died in 1582, and she was canonized in 1622, which means after 40 years of canonization. I mean, 40 years today, there are people who still remember. We remember her. We remember him. They can really, you have those, what we call eyewitnesses who saw you. So that means we have more about Teresa of Avila. We can talk about Teresa of Lisieux. In fact, after 28 years, she was canonized, which means that after her death, immediately, the canonization process took place. When we look at our forefather, John of the Cross, it took him 135 years to be canonized, which means that none of his classmates, none of his family members were still there. So we might miss a lot about him. In fact, all the things we get about the figure of John of the Cross are the nuns who left Spain and went to France. So that's where the popularity of John of the Cross came from. And that's one. So if you hear people saying he wanted to be forgotten completely, no, I think it has to do with how long it took for the church to pick up his canonization cause. That's why we may miss a lot of passion and emotions about our forefather, John of the Cross. I would like to introduce my topic about the images that we do see in his poems. First, he has a very beautiful background. He's kind of a person that admires nature. He's a man who could observe nature, and he had the ability to put what he has observed into writings. He pays a lot of attention to the sweetness of things around him, and he has this ability to use words to put it. Now, people who have, if you read the Spain of John, I mean, there are two books. There's the Spain of Teresa of Avila, which so much talks about her coming from the feminist background and her staying because of the business background and people who had a Jewish blood about that. But also there's the Spain of John of the Cross. When you look at the Spain of John of the Cross, you realize that by the time he comes up to write in the 16th century, Spanish language had developed a lot. Scholars say if he had written in the 13th century, maybe we would miss a lot of words that he uses because they were not yet coiled. I mean, language grows. I mean, imagine the English of Shakespeare is not the English you're speaking. Things like that. And usually we make a joke in the house, there is Briton English, there is American, and there is African English too. Yeah, so they appreciate that. But they also want to appreciate that John of the Cross is a product of the Jesuits. And we know their schools are some of the best that we can talk about. And we know by that time the Jesuits would really journey with by the fact that he attended their education. He was introduced to Greek, he was introduced to classic Latin, he was introduced on how to do sentence construction, Jesuits are known to do long essays and read them back to their students. So we can't really underlook that is going to contribute on who is John of the Cross. Yes, he loves beauty. Yes, he's always out saying this. But also the Jesuits, how they taught him on how to construct what he has seen into words is what we see into our forefathers. Looking at his poems, we can come up with images in different ways. Some of the images are processional images. These are images that show that the spiritual life involves a process that is marked by a beginning, a way of proceeding, and leads to the ultimate destination. It's kind of a journey. He tries to show you in his writing that we're on the journey. Even our spirituality is in a journey. You'll hear wordings like the departure. You'll see him talking about the way, the path, and the door. These are all images to show that we are on the move. There is what we call the ascension images. These are images that signify the elevated nature of the spiritual enterprise. God himself is elevated and dwells on high. John of the Cross in his teaching will try to tell us that God lives on a high elevation. That's why you'll see him talking about the mountain, the ladder, and the flight of the solitary bird. We talked about the birding so much when we were coming in the car with Mr. Rico. Then he talks about illuminative kind of images. John wants to tell us that God is light. And when we come to God, we are from darkness coming to that light. And that's why he will go ahead and talk about the lamp. Of course, the dark night, the clouds, and the living flames. These are all images that tells you that God is light itself. There are also some elementary images. As we said, historians have tried to look at how far did he cover in terms of, now here you talk about miles and I talk about kilometers. So I'll not try to convert miles into kilometers. But yes, if you try to look at kilometers from where I come from, and you look at him walking, unlike the mother, Teresa of Avila, who had a cart and she would be driven, John of the Cross would just pick his walking stick and put on his sandals and is off to Granada from Segovia. That's how he made his journeys. So historians, when they look at how he covers that journey, it's a beautiful long journey. I won't convert that, but really you will see that for the 49 years he lived, he walked a lot. But in that walking, he observed many things. He looked at the hills. He looked at the mountains. He saw different kind of birds. And all the things will come into his portraits. Then he talks about the images. You know, to put it in a simpler way, he's a child of Romeo and Juliet. Under normal circumstance, even today in some societies, such marriage would have a problem. But also trying to look at the Spain of the time. In fact, a new scholar would tell us today that the mother of John is a product of the Morocco. You know, Spain was once colonized by Morocco. A thing that the Spaniards won't want to hear anymore. But it's true. So there was also intermarriages between the Pope of Morocco and the Spanish people. So poor Catalina, when you check in her blood, there is that line. And so, after the Spanish had won this, they never wanted all this. But however, they kept on underlooking these people. So, you can't imagine this well-to-do weaver going for this immigrant from Morocco. So, that marriage, in the mind of the time, won't. However, John of the Cross, even as he grows up, he recognizes that he's that. For the lover and the beloved, nothing matters. Not the wealth, not the what. When the lover begins looking for the beloved, all these other things won't make sense. And he brings that image from his family background to compare to our souls when we are searching God. Even when we think we are searching God, God is already searching for us. So he brings that. So those are some of the images that I would like to discuss. However, there is something that comes out that gives a lot of interest. And this is the image of departure, of going out. If you look at how he opens his poem. Now, I'd like to say departure first. When you look at some of this image, you'll find one according to scripture, you'll find according to history of his time, and you'll find how he wanted to teach us about it. So, let's talk about going out, departing. He brings the story of that. When you go to the commentaries, you'll see himself comparing on how people moved from Egypt going to the Holy Land. That kind of departure via the desert, crossing the sea. He brings that and he gives it a background of scripture. He discusses that. But again, he comes to say, as people are focusing on let me try to read the actual poem. Where have you hidden, beloved, and left me mourning? You frayed like a stung after wounding me. I went out calling you, and you are gone. We see that there is kind of going out in that. There is a departure in that. Oh, one dark night fired with love's urgent longings. The sheer grace. I went out unseen, my house now all being stilled. John of the Cross believed in going out. So, and that going out to him was a kind of leaving one stage to another. When we are looking for God, there is needing out, there is going out. Going out to him means a sacrifice, that we sacrifice some things to get something more. And he makes it in a beautiful way. On my bed at night I thought him, whom my heart loves. Thought him, but I did not find him. I will rise again and go about the city. In the streets and crossing I will seek him whom my heart loves. The spiritual departure, it should be pointed, it refers to the two ways of going after God. One consists on departing from all things that don't make sense to that matters and that will make us to achieve God. Moreover, in St. John of the Cross, the movement of going out was a self-departure. It signified entering into the world of others. Thus, departure is not only going out, it's also a movement of entrance into someone's life. And we know our life is a life of sacrifice, and that's what John was trying to talk about. So we depart from our own small world to make up some little sacrifice to go and see the other. John of the Cross also brings the image of the mountain. In many of where I come from in Africa, we pray traditionally we do pray facing the mountain. Because on top of that mountain that we really went or saw what is happening there, that means that the spirit were there. Up now there is a song like Face Mount Kenya. That's where our liberty is. Uhuru is a Swahili word which means freedom. We should face that mountain to get strength. So even in many cultures, on the top of the mountain God dwelled. But also we see Moses. He meets God on the mountain. John of the Cross himself is a Carmelite, of course. He talks about Elijah, Mount Oreb. And so these are figures that would see God on the mountain. And John, and I think I've talked this at Santa Cruz, John sees that our journey is climbing Mount Carmel, all of us. And climbing Mount Carmel will be a time it's like a mountain climber. When you are climbing a mountain, you'll take 5 bottles of water, you'll take 3 books to read at night, you'll take 2 mosquito nets, you'll take 3 t-shirts. But after a couple of a height, you'll realize that, no, I don't need 3 books, 1 will be enough. And those 2, you just throw them away. You realize 1 mosquito net is enough for me for the whole journey. The 2 won't make any sense. You realize all I need, you'll go for what matters. I need water, I need my medication. I don't need to have 5 different kind of pair of socks, and you'll keep on shedding off what doesn't matter because you are struggling to reach the height. And your energy is getting lower. And so John of the Cross tells us, when we are focusing to go to God on this mountain, we shed off some of our habits, we shed off some of our vices, because we are going towards light. There are these things that keeps us in the dark, we shall always shed them off. So this is how he brings his beautiful image of the mountain. Now, the image of the solitary bird. When you try to look at his poems, he doesn't mention the word a bird, but you'll get an idea that he's trying to describe a bird. I went out seeking love, and with hope I flew so high that I overtook the prey. I mean, goats and cows don't fly. I think there were no planes during his time. So what is he talking about? It seems the highest place. It seeks the highest place. It withstands no company. It holds its beak in the air. It has no definite color. It sings so sweetly. What is that? I mean, that's kind of a bird that is trying to describe. In a wonderful way, my one flight surpassed 1,000. For the hope of heaven attains as much as hopes fall. This seeking is my only hope, and I had not been disappointed, because I flew so high that I took the prey. You'll see many of them, either from the Dark Night, either from the Spiritual Canticles, talking about how he flies. And knowing the span of the time, they never had planes. Knowing the span of the time, they never had, their cows didn't fly, their house didn't fly. So we come up, we say, he's talking about a bird. So, one of the sisters that maybe a few of those that really kept up his letters would say, he is talking about, in stanzas, the bird is not mentioned by name, but is understood and the subject here, who flew so high that took the prey. The bird under discussion belongs to a group of praying birds, as he attests, because I flew so high and I overtook the prey. When I was coming with Mr. Rico, we talked about birds, and he told me about those years when he would do climbing of hills and mountains. One of the things that would always drive him higher and higher is to see the nest of these birds and to look at them. And he told me about some of the very nice looking birds. They're irresponsible. They don't help. They don't build a nest. They don't help in the hatching. They just keep on going. And they do not even sing well. It's the ugly one, according to him, that are responsible, that will stay with the young ones, that will teach the young ones to skills of survival, that will make sure that they build a strong nest. Now, thank you. So when we're talking about, we just came up and said, yes, when you're so much concerned about yourself alone, you'll not be charitable enough. I'm not saying that beautiful people and some people are not charitable, but there is that energy of me that will take away the charity in you. So maybe to be charitable enough, we have to share our time. The time cannot just be yours. To be charitable, maybe resources maybe to be yours only. So John of the Cross is trying to say, for a soul that is in search of God, how it flies, even how it overtakes others, how it challenges its own vices, its own habits, by flying more and overcoming many others. That's why he's trying to give more emphasis by putting up this bird. And one of the sisters, called Isabella of the Incarnation, says that John of the Cross wrote a treatise on the property and qualities of a solitary bird, though he doesn't mention it by name. It is supposed to be a work that is aimed at explaining the solitary of the soul that is focusing on entering God. It's kind of like a retreat. Those birds also do a retreat. And when we retreat in our life, we try to look at our life where things have been not praising, and how to. And then we challenge ourselves to go beyond the boundaries of our comfort. And also we know that to share with others, we have also to deny ourselves something. So that's what. So this is the image of the bird that John of the Cross is trying to tell us. As I said in the beginning, that John of the Cross is so good into talking about the lover and the beloved. And this image may come from his own parents. Maybe he had his mother saying. And John of the Cross was once taken to his uncles after the death of his father, and they rejected them. So maybe his mother to explain to them why his father is not in the picture anywhere, or why they had to move from this place to this place. He had to say how things happen. And maybe John came to know that for the love of his father, for the mother, riches, family business, titles never mattered. All that mattered is the love for this Katarina. So you would see Gonzalez's image and Katarina in John's writing when he's talking about the beloved and the lover. So that comes out very well. That is a beautiful, and I know we call him the doctor of love, of divine love. But there is a beautiful writing that comes in his Marxism. This is how we can recognize a person who truly loves God. If he or she is contented with nothing less than God. This is kind of in the commentary on the spiritual canticles. Satisfaction of heart is not found in possessing of things, but in being stripped of them all in and in the poverty of the spirit of the heart. Elsewhere, John writes, love does not consist in feeling great things, but in having a great detachment and suffering for the beloved. When the soul, and John of the Cross still says, when we think we are searching God, really God is searching us. And that's come from Augustine. Later have I known you, but still he was searching him. So he is trying to tell us that really the one searching is. So you will see that he's talking about the bride and the bridegroom and the kind of attachment. This is all from his personal background. John of the Cross presents God as... Oh, before I got that. John of the Cross tells us that in the evening of our life, only love will matter. Many things may not matter. And I think it came very well in our Requiem Divina. Yes, yeah. Love will matter in the evening of our life. So, and that love really sometimes requires self-emptying. So, but still, John of the Cross wants to present God as a hidden lover. In fact, I would like to say that in my ordination, we call souvenir, I try to use this very well. But John of the Cross tells us that in the spiritual canticle, the bride feels her beloved is hidden from her, and she goes out in search of him. She is in love with the hidden God, and so she cries out, "Where have you hidden, beloved?" Those are the opening of the spiritual canticle, stanza 1. Even though God is hidden, the bride sees him as her beloved. If by chance you've seen him, the one I love most, tell him I'm sick, I suffer, I die. This is kind of like talking to the shepherds, those who got the mountain, those who got the hills, those who got the wilderness. In case you've seen him by chance, tell him, I suffer, I'm sick, and I die. This is how our soul struggles to meet. And I mean, in reality, there are those moments, sometimes you hear someone says, I do my rosaries, I do fasting, I give charity. In fact, I've given this to the homeless. I send such a check to this. But why is this happening to me? How would you answer that? Apart from saying, the beloved is with you, but he's hidden. He's hidden. I do this charity, I do this, I turn mass, and this is happening to me. And maybe, so that could really explain that. And John tries to tell us that she is aware as long as she is in this earthly life. He tries to tell us that even those, And Teresa of Avila is talking about in the mansions, and of course he gets from John. He tells us like even the seventh mansion is not like heaven. You may have the feeling of God. You may understand even why the good people do suffer. You may understand that, but you are not in heaven. There is still a curtain that blocks you to understand that. So we just can't understand everything about God in this life. In the philosophical studies, they just tell us, let God be God, and you are a human being. Your level of understanding who is God ends somewhere, because God is different. But John of the Cross goes ahead to tell us about this. In his commentary on the spiritual canticles, I love to quote him, neither the sublime communication nor the sensible awareness of his nearness is a sure testimony of his gracious presence, nor a dryness or lack of this a reflection of his absence. Not that when I'm happy, when everything is moving on well, it doesn't mean that he's so close to me. Nor when I feel like I'm down, it doesn't mean that he's absent to me. So he is hidden. He's a hidden lover. And that's why John of the Cross cries out to those who go to the mountain, if you've seen him, because he has wounded me and I'm not seeing him. So how do you come up to find this hidden lover? And how are we going to be comfortable? Are we just going to say, yeah, he's a hidden lover and that's the end? You see, usually around Christmas, in his poems to the Nativity, John of the Cross himself says, the Father spoke only one word, and that word was his Son. And so looking at his Son is that one word, is that consolation. And we also saw the Son. When you try to look at the prayers of Jesus, he was kind of calling upon for attention in the same way that we go through, because Christ also put on a human flesh like us. So that human flesh would lead him to do that. And sometimes we've created our own images on how God should be. God should be like a prayer should be like a shopping list. I go to the supermarket and 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, it's not, you've taken away the fact that it's a communication or whatever. So there are those images that me or you or someone else have created on how God should be. When I called upon him, it's like calling 911. They should hurry up. Why is it not? So those images also make us not really to recognize how God is. Beauty in the poems of John. As we began by saying that we've lost to know how beautiful, how John appreciated beauty, because 135 years from the time of his death and his canonization. I'm using canonization because this is when someone is writing becomes so popular. That's when the whole church picks out of interest in this person, and that's when we can always do this. So by that time, we might have lost out of commentary, we might have lost first eyewitness, so we might have lost how much he laughed when he saw a bird of different colors. We might have lost how much he lost when he walked on a mountain and things like that. However, John of the Cross loved beauty, and the beauty was very, very close to him. And we can see this in his poems. In his commentary on silent music, we see beauty coming out. Her beloved is the silent music, because in him she knows and enjoys beauty. The word beauty appears several times. But also from his history, we know that he painted Jesus Christ on the cross, burning on the world. Christ, even in that time, was so sensitive to the beauty that he loved. John of the Cross himself describes Christ coming to us. He not brushing. He uses the image of grass and with a shepherd. Like he left beauty and dignity in us. When God came and stayed with us, we got that beauty. We got that dignity from him. He goes ahead and says, behold, let's go forth to behold in your beauty. And this comes out very well when he writes and says, O woods and thickets, planted by the hands of my beloved, O green Mabel, coated bright with flowers, tell me who has passed you. And then elsewhere in the dark night we see, one dark night fired with love is urgent longing. O sheer grace, I went out unseen, I went out my household being at rest. These are all images of beauty. So John of the Cross is a person who loved beauty. Now, in the early 1990s, when they were celebrating 400 years of John of the Cross, one person came up and wrote a book, The History of 400 Years of Misunderstanding and What It Means for the Future of Christian Mysticism. He tries to, I love it because the order kind of responded, and many scholars who are came up to respond. One of my professors is called Stephen Payne. He lives the other side of Washington, and the likes of Father Jude, no, not Jude, there is another one. But I mean, many Kame scholars came up and responded. After there is someone who says, for the last 400 years, let us face the truth. We don't understand this gentleman. And then people came, no, he can be understood, and try to explain. So the person who goes into, let's look at his poems by trying to spot out the images and how beautiful they are, is also trying to respond to this gentleman. He's called James Arrow, who wrote a book and says, for the last 400 years, Christian mysticism have not benefited from the writings of the Holy Father because we have not understood it. Now, these scholars are still agree that John of the Cross's language wasn't the simplest. They know that. But they say, why was it not simple? Maybe because it's not that John of the Cross is hard, but maybe what he's expressing, what he's trying to explain, maybe is also hard for us. And so we have to go through with this. And we know that mystical language is not a rational language. So we just have to go slow into this. That has been my small presentation on John of the Cross, and any question, any contribution is welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Father. Father, when you said the Morocco, I think in